Welcome to This Explainer. Mark your calendars for November 24th, 2026, because on that exact day, Nepal is set to hit a massive, highly anticipated economic milestone, graduating from the United Nations Least Developed Country, or LDC, category. Now, on the surface, this is an incredible achievement, right? It's a formal global recognition of national progress and resilience, but as we're going to see, it is also a massive stress test for the country's entire economic foundation. But this brings us to a huge, provocative question. What actually happens to a country when its international safety net just vanishes overnight? Because you see, graduating from LDC status isn't just taking a victory lap. It means the gradual, real-world removal of crucial international support measures. We're talking about losing preferential trade access, concessional financing, and specialized technical assistance. Nepal is transitioning from a nation eligible for special, protected treatment to one expected to compete globally on a much more level playing field. So the overarching narrative we're diving into today is exactly this. Will this 2026 transition be a launchpad for unprecedented prosperity, or is it a dangerous cliff that could literally erase decades of progress?
Part 1. Milestone or a cliff?
If you just look at the raw numbers, Nepal's story looks like an absolute macroeconomic miracle. Extreme poverty plummeted from over 50% back in 1996 down to just 0.4% in 2023. At first glance, this builds up this illusion of perfect macroeconomic health. It looks for all the world like a rapidly developing nation firing on all cylinders. But to truly understand the impending stress test, we have to look under the hood at what's actually fueling this drop. Here's the catch, and it's a big one. This incredible drop in poverty is precariously balanced on foreign employment. The sheer volume of workers heading abroad to secure employment is staggering. In fact, remittances make up nearly a third of the country's entire GDP, hovering right around 22 to 23% in recent years. So this progress isn't necessarily being built from within, it's being sent back from abroad.
Part 2. The graduation stress test.
Now, when a nation relies that heavily on money flowing in from the outside, losing preferential trade access and soft aid acts as a massive shock to the system. The international cushions are being removed, and the domestic engine has to start pulling its own weight. And with per capita GDP steadily rising past the $1,400 mark as we approach that 2026 transition, this rising income pushes Nepal right past the LDC thresholds. It brings the country into a much more exposed policy environment. Nepal is stepping into an arena where it absolutely must compete globally, attracting investment, trading goods, without the special treatment it's relied on for decades. To understand why that's so risky, we need to deconstruct the specific dangers of relying so heavily on exported labor.
Part 3. The remittance trap.
To really understand this trap, we need to look at where all that money actually goes. Well, over 70%. 72.4% to be exact, goes straight into daily consumption. We're talking groceries, clothing, just basic everyday needs. It is not going into building local businesses, it's not funding tech startups, and it's certainly not financing factories. There is very limited productive reinvestment. And because of this, the entire national economy becomes highly vulnerable to external shocks. Just imagine a change in labor laws in a destination country or a global economic downturn. The ripple effects back home would be immediate and severe.
Part 4. Trade and industry deficits.
So let's peel back the next layer of the onion here. If domestic consumption is sky high, but nobody is investing in local manufacturing, where are all these consumed goods actually coming from? Well, the answer is a stark reality check. A highly narrow export base versus a massive, massive import dependency. Nepal's exports are largely low-tech and traditional. Think woolen carpets, palm oil, cardamom, pashminas. On the flip side, because domestic production simply can't meet the demand fueled by all that remittance cash, the country relies on foreign imports for practically everything, from heavy machinery down to daily consumer goods. The result is a massive, widening gap that economists often call the jaws of the deficit. Imports are absolutely skyrocketing, while exports are just barely creeping upward. This creates a staggering deficit imbalance. We're talking over 1.7 trillion Nepali rupees in just the 2021/22 fiscal year alone. It's a striking reminder of exactly how exposed the country's trade balance really is right now. So why not just produce more at home? Well, if you break down the GDP by sector, the industrial sector has actually been shrinking, dropping down to just 13.6% over a 5-year period. This is a textbook example of a capability trap. The country is essentially transitioning into a service-based economy without ever taking the time to build a strong foundational industrial base.
When those preferential trade agreements vanish in 2026, Nepal, as it stands right now, lacks the sheer industrial capability to compete on standard global trade rules.
Part 5. Bridging the Provincial Divide. Now, to fully grasp this, we have to zoom in from the national level and look locally, because geography and internal structure are playing a massive role here. Nepal's shift to federalism hasn't managed to close the huge economic gaps between its regions yet. You have thriving, highly competitive provinces like Bagmati and Gandaki, with much better infrastructure and solid investment. But then you have trailing provinces like Sudor Paschim and Karnali, lagging way far behind. If the whole country is going to survive this LDC graduation stress test, these internal disparities are an absolute vulnerability. A huge driver behind this divide is how the government is spending its money. There's been an average shortfall of about 35.3% in capital expenditure. What that means in plain English is that the government is successfully spending money on recurrent, day-to-day expenses, salaries, administrative costs, but they are severely struggling to execute long-term investments. They're squandering the budget on the present rather than building the critical infrastructure, the roads, the energy grids that are so desperately needed to connect and elevate those trailing provinces. And to make matters trickier, this spending issue is completely compounded by debt. Public debt as a share of GDP is rising sharply, closing in on 43%. Now, remember that LDC graduation we've been talking about? Post-graduation, those highly concessional soft development loans that Nepal has heavily relied on will completely vanish. This means refinancing and servicing this rising debt burden is going to become much, much more expensive. The fiscal space will tighten up at the exact moment Nepal needs to be aggressively investing in its own future. Part 6. Pillars for the future. Now, it's definitely not all doom and gloom. So how does Nepal actually navigate this? To ensure a soft landing and emerge as a truly competitive regional partner, the sources outline 3 core pillars. First, fiscal discipline, tying spending strictly to productive long-term investments, not just those daily expenses. Second, digital transformation, leveraging technology to just hurdle right over those physical barriers. And third, subnational competitiveness, empowering all provinces to generate growth, so the whole country isn't leaning on just 1 or 2 urban centers. I want to zoom in on that second pillar for a second, because it is a massive, massive silver lining. To quote the research directly, digital connectivity bypasses borders, enabling even remote or landlocked nations to integrate into global value chains. This is huge. Nepal's rugged terrain and its landlocked geography have historically just strangled its trade potential. But here's the thing. The digital economy doesn't care about mountains. It doesn't care about a lack of seaports. It offers a very real way to completely bypass physical geographic constraints. And the data totally backs this up. Nepal is already making incredible strides here, experiencing an explosive growth curve with internet adoption soaring well past 55% of the population. And because of this widespread digital adoption, a thriving $515 million IT services sector has been born. Software development, business processing, tech startups, these are becoming a very viable escape route from that capability trap we talked about earlier. It is concrete proof that integration into the global economy through digital means is absolutely possible.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we come back to the ultimate question. Is Nepal's 2026 LDC graduation going to be a launchpad for resilient, diversified growth, or is it a cliff edge into structural stagnation? The safety nets are coming off for sure. The coming years are going to require strict fiscal discipline, a massive embrace of the digital economy, and a true, earnest bridging of that provincial divide. It's a high-stakes transition, and watching how Nepal navigates this stress test is going to offer some incredible lessons for developing economies all over the world. Thanks for joining me to unpack all this, and definitely keep an eye on 2026.